morning, everybody. Morning. My fellow brothers and sisters. So, together we'll build a world that's new, that's fit for kings and fit for queens. That's the goal, right?
Yes.
How are we going to get there? So, Reverend Moon outlined a plan on how to accomplish just that. So today we're going to look at one part of that plan, and it's taken from the duties and missions of the citizens of the Heavenly Kingdom, which is Peace Message number 5, those of you who are reading the Hundati. And so today we're going to talk about practicing true love. And that does take practice. So, let's see. Space bar?
You're good.
Okay. Give a little bit of delayed reaction here. So this is the quote that I want to be analyzing today. First, you will inscribe on your heart the need to uphold the cosmic King of Peace, who is the horizontal true parent, and to live with absolute obedience on the horizontal axis for eternity as a citizen of Chenon Il Guk. You will make living for the sake of others, which is the practice of true love, the standard of your life. You will establish a true family and raise true children who are sinless and pure, thus protecting God's lineage and bequeathing it intact from generation to generation. So that's a mouthful. So we break that down basically into 3 parts. First, you will inscribe on your heart the need to uphold the cosmic King of Peace, who is the horizontal true parent, and to live with absolute obedience on the horizontal axis for eternity as a citizen of Chenon Il Guk. Okay, so what does it mean to establish a true family? Sorry, what does it mean to live for the sake of others? Inscribe on your heart the need to uphold the King of Peace. So that basically means follow the Messiah and live with absolute obedience on the horizontal axis for eternity as a citizen of Chenon Il Guk. That basically means follow the principles, the heavenly principles that are given to us as a guide. Now, a lot of times people complain about religious doctrines because there's a lot of rules in religion. And people complain about that because they feel that the rules restrict their behavior. But actually, following rules is the opposite. Following rules allows you to become free. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail, but basically let me give you an example. Yesterday, my kids were playing this piano game on the computer. And although they sound like Rachmaninoff now, it's only with 2 fingers playing these little keys. And it sounds beautiful, but it's not really learning a skill, unfortunately. So maybe I'll get a real piano so they can actually learn something useful. But the point I realized then was Rachmaninoff and all these other great composers, in order for them to express their talent, they had to follow rules, musical rules. And by following those rules of music, then they were now introduced into a world of freedom. Freedom to express their talent through music. And the same goes for Shakespeare. Followed the rules of language, and he was able to express his talent in so many plays and sonnets. Not following rules, what would Shakespeare sound like? Which is kind of meaningful on some level, but really not as deep and meaningful as when you follow the rules of the language that you're born into and are then able to express deep emotions and thoughts through that vehicle called language. So following rules and regulations God has provided for us is a means of giving us freedom. That is what I wanted to say. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Second part, you will make living for the sake of others, which is the practice of true love, the standard of your life. I think that's pretty much self-explanatory. And the third part is establishing a four-position foundation, a true family, and allowing your spiritual wisdom and your heart and all the true love training that you've inherited, pass that down to the next generation. I learned something interesting on the weekend. Psychologists believe that phobias, fear of something, are actually passed down. They're actually memories, cellular memories that are passed down through genes from one generation to the next. And I thought that was fascinating. They're still looking into that, but I thought that might be true, because phobias cannot really be explained through life experience. Like people are scared of spiders and whatnot. It wasn't because they were bitten by one. We don't know where it comes from. Anyway, so establish a true family. Bequeath that into another generation. Now, I'm still struggling at the stage of establishing a true family. I can't check that box in any shape or form at this point. So when it comes to bequeathing that to a next generation, I don't know how that's done. You'll have to talk to an elder member of our generation, like Mr. and Mrs. Pine. How did you do that? So it's it's wonderful seeing your daughter here on the week in the Christmas with her husband, and that was great. But passing that knowledge and spirit down to the next generation, that's our task. So go back to the original ideal. What was God trying to do? God was trying to establish this kingdom of heaven on earth by establishing a world or a realm of heart or love. So, what does this world that we're living in teach us about love? Right? When you watch a Hollywood movie, it teaches you about love, how to fall in love. Rule number 1, find a complete stranger. 2, reveal to each other intimate details about your life for half an hour. Even less is fine. 3, stare deeply into each other's eyes without talking for 4 minutes. Of course, they speed that version up in movies because our attention span is only 2.5 minutes long, so they have to kind of condense it. But anyway, that's basically it. So, pretty good advice, right? So how is it? God's yearning from the outset of creation is to build a world centered on heart and love. How was God to do that? So the plan was Adam and Eve grow during this period of growth, and then upon the fulfillment of that growth, then they are free to consummate their love towards one another as husband and wife, create a world, a family centered on God. And then, of course, based upon that, a true family, the true love, true life, true lineage, all that stuff, all that good stuff is going to happen. Now, what happened was, on the period of that growth, the interception of the fall took place, and that was destroyed, and instead, we got this instead. So, that's what happened. Now, going back to what that fall was all about, it was all about the misuse of love, okay? And how do we know this? We know this through major religions, all hone in on this one point. We also know that it's passed down from generation to generation. It's not something that you eat physically. And thirdly, it's the rise and fall of nations. We always, by studying history, we can see what happens when a nation starts to become immoral and fall into sexual sin. It degenerates and falls and just wastes away. So we know that's happened before, and we know that's going to happen again. And it's all because of this one thing about the misuse of love. How did this happen? In our church, we go into a lot of training and teaching about this, but basically it happened when the archangel Lucifer, who was in a position of being God's servant, was, in his mind, from his viewpoint, replaced by Adam and Eve. And this led to jealousy on his part, and from his point of view, he felt that Adam and Eve were, not as good as him in that position. He had a horizontal spiritual relationship with Eve, and this happened, and then Eve cut herself off from God's vertical point of view, and then pursued Adam on a horizontal love as a substitute. Now, this is important because this is what we do in this world. We have no relationship or very little relationship with God, and in order for us to experience love, which we crave, we pursue it in our horizontal relationships without any regard to the vertical relationship with God. And that's important to remember, because this is the mistake that Eve made, and she pursued Adam on a horizontal relationship, trying to restore that sense of love and belonging and oneness, and away from fear and loneliness. And of course, Adam fell, we know that story, and he was cut off from the vertical point of view as well. And then Adam and Eve were cut off from God. They experienced fear. All kinds of bad things happened. So we know this story. We go into a lot of detail about that in another lecture. The purpose of life was violated, basically. Mind and body disunited, okay? This is our personal conflict inside ourselves. Man-woman relationships, look around you. And how do we treat this nature? How do we treat the world that we're supposed to be governing and taking care of? Look around you. So that's the reality of the world we live in. Now, why did our Creator not create a fail-proof plan? Okay, we think, okay, well, this is a flawed beginning. How come it happened? How could we allow that to happen? When things go wrong in a company, we look to the boss of the company and we say, how could you allow that to happen? We try to find someone to blame. Can we blame God for what happens in the Garden of Eden? I'm not going to go into that too much, but I do want to address that point, because there was always this possibility of the fall. Okay, there was always a possibility that the fall could take place. And the reason for that is because God wanted to create a world of love. He did not want to rule by the gun or by force, which is what dictators all around the world are doing. That's how they control their societies. He did not want to create that kind of world or dominion. He wanted to create a world where the force of love was the most powerful force. Now, in order for love to exist, there has to be choice. There has to be freedom to choose. Otherwise, it's not love. So in order to create that world, God needed to make love the most powerful force. And it was really a reflection of what God is. God is love. So that is why there's this possibility of the fall. The force of unprincipled love is still more powerful than the force of the principle, the force of wanting to do the right thing. Okay? That's not enough to combat the force of unprincipled love. So God had to introduce something in that growing period to help Adam and Eve get through it intact, so that they could then experience that realm of oneness. Okay? And that was the commandment not to eat. So now, the force of the principle and the commandment combined, following those two, was more powerful than the force of unprincipled love. And that's what they needed to cling on to whilst they're going through the growing period. Now, what is perfection? Perfection is the satisfaction of oneness with God, the satisfaction that you experience of having a complete and absolute relationship with God. Once you're in that realm, There is no force on earth or in the spirit world or anywhere that can tempt you away from that. For example, usually I can tempt my teenage daughter with ice cream. Yesterday, we bought ice cream and everyone ate ice cream. A lot of ice cream. Okay? So much ice cream, in fact, that my teenage daughter felt sick. She couldn't even think about ice cream without the urge to throw up. Okay? At that moment, do you think I could tempt her with any ice cream? Do you think I could get her to do something by tempting her with ice cream? No. In fact, it had the opposite effect. That is an example, a very poor example of mine, of being in the realm of God's love, being in the realm of perfection. There's no force on the earth that could tempt you away from that, because you are experiencing everything that humans want to experience. There's nothing else outside of that where you want to be, okay? So, but to get there, we need to have a rule or rules. We need to have something to hold on to, and that was the commandment. To not eat ice cream. That was it. Now, there are rules that we tell our kids to protect them, and once they're old enough to understand, those rules no longer become necessary. For instance, what's a classic thing that parents teach their children, their young children? Don't talk to strangers. Good example. Now, if we were to follow that rule for the rest of our life, how many friends would we have? Exactly. But whilst you're in that growing period and you're very vulnerable and sensitive and easily influenced by this, that, and whatever, it's a really good rule to have in place. Don't talk to strangers. So, and the purpose of the rule is to allow you to grow to an area where you can be free. Now, the purpose of do not eat, that commandment, do not have sexual relations, which is what the commandment really was, is to allow Adam and Eve to grow, to allow them to reach that realm of perfection where they can be totally free. So it's not a restrictive thing, it's a freedom thing. And once that commandment was in place, if they had had faith in it and held on to it and believed in it, even if they couldn't understand why, you know, often kids always ask, why? You know, you just tell them to do something, why? Shut up and just do it. You know, it's really frustrating, as it must have been for God, to just look, I have your best interests in mind. Do you trust me on that? Then just do it, okay? So that's all we need to do. Just follow that one commandment. Unfortunately, we know the story. That didn't happen. This selfish purpose was created. This is the center of fallen people's thinking. This is honestly the center of fallen people's families. And this is honestly the center of this world in many ways. So that is the world we live in. So how does that happen even today is through spirit world, through our emotions. We are tempted to do all kinds of unprincipled things. We act on those things because they are evil thoughts. They lead to evil actions. What we need to do is we need to cut that relationship with the evil thoughts and spiritual world, and then be able to live a good life. So if we go back to that original quote that we had at the beginning, where Reverend Moon is teaching us how to become citizens of this principled world, then first you will inscribe in your heart the need to uphold the cosmic King of Peace. Okay, so that means we need to follow the Messiah and have absolute obedience on the horizontal axis. In other words, live our lives in obedience. We need to have a discipline. in order to make it through the growing period. And then living for the sake of others, that's the practice part. That's where we need to really practice true love. Now, true love is a love centered on God, thank you, not self-centered love. And that's really the big difference. We call it unprincipled love, but really it's not love. Because love is really more than just chemicals happening in your brain. It's more than just serotonin and dopamine. These are kind of temporary things that happen to help us to interact with one another. But love is more precious than that. Because what happens to those chemicals in your mind? Are they constant or are they changing? They're changing, right? But love is more of a constant thing. Love is a choice thing. We've talked about this before. This is a whole different topic. Just talking about love. What is love and all this stuff. But this is really important because during that growing period, which we are all in, we need a spiritual discipline. We need to follow heavenly principles, heavenly rules, in order to do those three things. Follow the Messiah, practice the rules, and establish a true family. So in summary, as I've just mentioned, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, you see it there, it's not here. Okay, great. Thanks, computer, you're really helping me out here. So, we've fallen away from our primary relationship with our Creator. We need a daily practice or discipline of obedience to heavenly principles in order to keep our spiritual growth on track. And we need to practice true love in all the dimensions of our relationships with others. So that is the most important thing. So that's it, basically. I mean, you already knew that. You want me to remind you? And here we are. So for the discussion point, I'd like you to answer, this is a multiple choice question. Which of the following are valid points to discuss right now? And 1, A is the weather, B is Donald Trump's hair, hands, etc. Or C, what am I doing, in other words, studying, working on, etc., in my daily life to keep my spiritual life on track? Imagine that right now we're in the middle of that growth stage. There's unprincipled love coming at an angle, and it's powerful enough to knock us off track. How are we doing in terms of keeping on track? What are we doing in our spiritual life to protect ourselves from that force? A friend of mine who lives in Africa, he said that when he was there was this story of a rhinoceros derailing a train. I don't know why the rhino charged the train, but it did. I don't think the rhino survived, unfortunately, but it charged the train, and it derailed the train. Now, I don't know about you, but that must have been one big rhino. Because train, think about a train. It's so powerful, so heavy, and yet a rhino coming at an angle derailed the train. Well, that's the power of unprincipled love. That's the power that it has on our life. And nobody's safe. Nobody is immune to that force. Okay? And that's why we need God. We need principles in our life. We need a life of discipline. We need a life of faith in order to get to the promised land. Anybody who tells you otherwise is mistaken. They're deluded. They are ignorant. They don't know the reality. Okay? So, the promised land is a world of freedom. The rules are designed to help you get there. They're not trying to hold you back. They're not trying to restrict you. They're not trying to rob you of your happiness and joy. In fact, the purpose of spiritual rules and disciplines is the opposite. They are there to help you be all you can be, to use an army ad. So I hope that satisfies your thirst for knowledge and truth on this beautiful Sunday morning, and I will end right there. Thank you.